Welcome to Passion Place, the show dedicated to couples in long-term relationships. I'm Mark, a tech geek turned relationship geek.
And I'm Lisa, a relationship geek and couples counselor. Whether you've been married for 2 years or 25 years, a lot of challenges can be the same. And until we address them, they don't go away.
We're digging into the common challenges and needs couples face, and we're looking for ways to support couples on their journey. Let's get into it. To introduce this topic, just imagine in a cozy suburban home, there's Emma and Jake are married and they're living together. And Emma feels particularly insecure and anxious about her relationship with Jake at this moment. And she's calling out for him, "Jake, where are you?" Needing his reassurance. She's like looking for him through the house. And Jake, he's sitting quietly in the living room, engrossed in his book. And he feels this knot of anxiety tightening as he hears Emma calling out. He stands and he starts to create distance, muttering under his breath, "I just need some space." And Emma, she's following him from room to room, basically pleading for reassurance and connection, not realizing that inadvertently she's actually pushing Jake further away. And each step she takes towards him results in Jake actually retreating. He's feeling increasingly suffocated by her pursuit. And this pursuit and retreat actually leaves them both feeling unseen and misunderstood and unloved. Does this sound familiar? You know, maybe you, dear listener, have experienced something like this. If not, maybe you know someone where this is something that you've heard this dynamic in their relationship. Well, welcome to the complex world of attachment styles. So in this episode, we're going to try and unpack what's really going on in these moments and how understanding both of you and your partner's attachment styles can really transform your relationship.
Yeah, 100%. Really, attachment style and the research behind that is the science behind love. How do we perceive ourselves, our relational selves? How do we perceive the other in relation? And how do we even view relationships in general?
Yeah, so really just to give you an overview, there are 4 attachment styles. And just to cover their names, there is secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. So secure is the one that we ideally want to work towards. What I thought was really interesting when I was looking into some of this research is that 1 in 3 people do not have a secure attachment style. So that is 33% of the people are either anxious, avoidant, or disorganized, but that's a lot of people.
Mark, when I see that research, I laugh because I'm like, oh, it's far more than that. Then again, maybe those are the people that I'm seeing. But
I was going to say, maybe there's some sampling bias there, just like the people who are needing help. Yes.
1,000%.
Lisa, maybe since this is something that you have studied quite a bit more, and I would love to hear your thoughts on why does understanding your own attachment style and that of your partner as well, why is this so important?
On this podcast, we're going to be exploring relationships, couples, marriage. That's why you're here. So it might be a little bit counterintuitive to say knowing yourself is actually the beginning of having a more stable relationship. So this is what we're going to focus on, at least for a few episodes, is understanding yourself so that you understand how you work in relation to somebody else. It's kind of like understanding a part of a machine, right? If you don't understand the inner workings and gears of the machine, you don't understand how the machine works in its totality. So attachment style is something that happens and starts developing from birth, even before then, depending on where your beliefs sway. So understanding how you were modeled attachment is extraordinarily important because that's where you start to get the ideas, the messages of what is right and safe versus what isn't. And sometimes based on how you grew up, how your nurturing style was, what is right or safe actually isn't. So again, as I mentioned earlier, when you're talking attachment style, you're getting to know yourself. What does self believe and do in the relationship? What is the other's role in a relationship? And then what do you think of relationships in general? Are they healthy? Do they feel good? Are they things that threaten you? Or are they things that make who you are? And we all have a lot of different views about what that looks like. And putting those elements together, that's attachment style.
Yeah. And I noticed when I was doing some of this other research I should first say, I did not know really about attachment styles. I'd kind of heard of them, kind of mentioned, but it's actually conversations with you that brought it more to my attention. Like, oh, this is something worth understanding and digging into deeper. And one of the things I took away from this is how attachment styles affect a lot in a relationship,
Mm,
how it affects our communication, how it affects how we handle conflict resolution. And that's a lot of just what a relationship is right there.
for sure. I know we'll get into this, but finding out what your own attachment style is can be revelatory in understanding why you feel the certain pains that you feel in a relationship, why you don't. It can also help you decide how and why you hold different needs and boundaries.
Mm.
So, again, preview of more to come. Needs, boundaries, good stuff. But yeah,
Yes.
communication, that's a big deal. If you reflect on how you communicate with people, first of all, do you want to?
Mm.
How is communication handled in your home? What was the anger culture, right? For some families, they're very expressive with their anger
Mm.
and meaning, elevated volumes, throwing things, some,
Wow.
things like that. I mean, it depends. Again,
Yeah.
for some people, that's commonplace. And some of that could be healthy and some of it isn't. And depending on the predictability of the culture in your home, how did you deal with anger? How did you celebrate things? How did you grieve? How were big feelings in general communicated? Were they communicated?
Mm.
Right? You'll be able to understand yourself and why you show up in a relationship like that. How do you communicate or not communicate?
Yeah.
And that goes right down to even body language, too. Have you ever noticed that in your relationships, and not even just marriage, but just in general, how people communicate differently? Some people can say a lot by saying very little.
It's true. Well, let's give a little bit of an overview of what each one of these attachment styles by name, what they sound like and what they look like, so we have a little bit better picture. Let me start off with the secure attachment, right?
Mhm.
That's individuals, they feel comfortable with intimacy and independence, and they're able to create a balanced, healthy relationship, and they're able to manage stress effectively. And they tend to have a positive view of themselves and their partners, leading to more stable and fulfilling relationships. So like that's
Ah,
the ideal, right? If we're not there right now, and I would say with some of the assessments we're going to share with you, you can figure out where you are, and it's not like I'm 100% of anything, right? It's a scale, right?
mhm. And please keep in mind that even if you aren't securely attached right now, it doesn't mean that you can't get there.
Right.
Part of it is, once you understand yourself, if you happen to have anything different than secure attachment, understanding what your wounds are, understanding what needs tend to fall under those categories, so extraordinarily vital because what you can do in your marriage is repair some of those wounds. And we'll talk about what some of those wounds look like and how they happen. But just know that there is great power in knowledge. Again, know thyself is the beginning of wisdom. Thank you, Socrates. But yeah, we're all trying to get to this place. I mean, gosh, how many of us can actually one feel comfortable with intimacy, not just physical intimacy, but deeper conversation? That in and of itself can be so scary. Finding balance between the responsibilities that you have, the kind of care and support that you give to a partner versus the kind of care and support that you give to yourself, finding that balance and managing stress effectively. I don't know about you, but managing stress effectively, even though I have all the tools and knowledge that I learned and they're in here, yeah, somebody is stress eating rainbow sherbet on the way home. So, you know, we like you said, it's a scale, it's relative, and it can
Yeah.
change.
Yes.
But yes, let's go into some of the. I mean, now that we know what we're trying to strive for in a relationship, positive view of self and
Mhm.
partners, like you said, being able to find fulfillment through that balance of I care for you, but I don't need you to survive.
Mm. Yeah.
Right? Or I'm okay with interdependence. That's probably another word that's used often to describe healthy attachment is
Mhm.
an interdependence. Yes, I want to depend on you. You are dependable. And also I know that if you aren't there, I will be okay.
Right. Well, do you want to introduce us to one of the unhealthy attachment styles?
Yeah. So, anxious preoccupied attachment. So, it can either be called anxious attachment or preoccupied attachment.
Mhm.
And that happens when you need you need a relationship. And
Mm.
that can look like I don't have high self-value. I am not okay on my own. I need to care for someone. I need to be supported by someone. I don't have the tools, the value, the worth, whatever it is, go ahead and
Mhm.
plug it in to be an okay human. So that looks like neediness,
Mhm.
closeness, wanting
Clingy.
to always have, yeah, clingy, which I know these are attributes that are very much looked down on in our society. In the US and Western culture in general, we're very independent. I mean, my gosh, our country was founded on the Declaration of Independence. So there you go. I mean, thanks, founding fathers. You're starting to screw up our attachment. But really, it's the neediness and clinginess comes from a lack of safety, a lack of
Mm.
safety in self, a lack of safety in your environment. These are the folks who fall into I am not safe in the world.
Mhm.
So I need someone to care for me. And that a lot of that comes with fear of abandonment, doubts about their ability to be a lovable person.
Mm. Wow.
And yeah, once you start to understand those wounds a little bit more, you can go, wow, how can I support finding that self-trust, finding a little bit more self-confidence, because that will really help. Yeah.
So that's anxious or anxious slash preoccupied. All right.
Right.
The next one is dismissive or avoidant.
Mm.
So what is this one?
This one is I am amazing on my own. These are
I don't need
folks that
anybody.
have, well, no. And because guess what? Everybody else isn't dependable. Now,
Right.
keep in mind, these are things that we learned growing up. And you have to think, why would somebody grow up thinking that they're the only ones that can take care of their needs?
Mm. Yeah.
Caregivers weren't available. And it could be, again, this is all shades of gray, right? But
Mhm.
it can range from, mom was sick and dad had to work a lot.
Right.
It could be mom and dad had a very tumultuous relationship and they were very distracted with their own emotional needs that they weren't able to attune to their own children, or big feelings were scary for them. So
Mhm.
in turn, when their child has, big expressions of feelings, it shuts them down. So that's when you start to learn, oh, I can't go to others. I can't show my vulnerability or my fears or my needs. So you get into this space of what's called toxic independence, where
Mm.
it's, I absolutely do not need anybody. And if I do need somebody, that's bad. That's shameful.
Right.
So it's a lot of walls. I'm sure that you can either see maybe some of that in yourself or in others where you go to connect. And for some reason, there's just like a barrier there. It can be as simple as like using humor to deflect some of the
Mhm.
deeper conversations, or actual aggression to keep people away.
It's interesting though. You talk about this idea of independence, and we value our ability to be self-reliant or independent, right? That we are
Right.
not fully dependent on someone else, right? It's like you have the anxious or preoccupied, which like I am not complete without another person to support me or to be able to show that I'm taking care of them, right? That there's that need for that other person. It's interesting though, because like I think, someone, who wants to start their own company and they're doing everything from the ground up, right? That's independence, right? But that's not what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about a level of mistrust of other people that I can't count on other people, right? Like
Mhm.
that's really what I'm picking up as the big difference.
And that is, yeah, I'm really glad that you pointed it out that way, because with these different types of attachment, it is all about that perception of yourself and others. So anxious attachment is I'm not okay by myself. I
Hmm.
need a relationship to validate me or my existence. The avoidant says, actually, I'm pretty dang great. It's others I don't trust.
Hmm.
And when you talk about what a relationship means to these two types of attachment, for anxious attachers, the relationship is everything.
Um,
And you can maybe start to see some characteristics early on in youth where there's a romanticizing of what a relationship is. Oh, someday my prince will come. How many Disney princesses maybe had some anxious attachment?
right. Yes. That's
I
interesting.
mean, we'll maybe we'll explore that another time, and not to slam Disney princesses, but you know, someday my prince will come, and all my problems will go away. Great. I have yet to see that dynamic actually play out.
Mm.
But then you have the avoidant who is like, oh, if I have somebody relying on me, then what does that mean for my business? Right? Hey, great.
Mhm.
You're an entrepreneur. You can build a business. You've had to be very self determinant to do that.
Mhm.
What does it mean to invite somebody else into that space? All of a sudden, that person gets very afraid. Relationships become very dangerous to their self, to the existence of self, and to the
Yeah.
things that they want to achieve.
Yeah. That's interesting because I also think of just this idea of a business owner, business builder, right?
Mhm.
Like the idea of saying, well, my company's actually growing. I need to bring in other people to help take off the load because I can't do it all. So I need someone to handle
Right.
customer support. I need someone to handle sales. And the idea is that if I don't feel I can trust them, that they're going to screw it up, then I am really holding back on what my business can accomplish too.
Mhm.
Right? I'm afraid to delegate. I don't trust people to do something.
Right. So you're taking on a lot more responsibility on yourself. And you're also, like you said, you're not delegating. Or if you are, oh, let's use the big fat M word, micromanaging. Because you don't trust that others will make a decision the way that you can.
And then I love you bringing back into the idea of the personal relationship, right? Of if I am very focused on me being the one who, like, I don't need anyone else, right? I view needing someone else or letting someone else in as a weakness of myself,
Yeah.
right? That becomes creating emotional barriers to connection.
I really think it does come down to trust,
Mm.
where it's trust in others versus trust in self. And learning to be able to, well, actually, both of them come down to trust to self in a way, because if you can't trust others, that means that you don't trust your ability to be able to gauge others
Mm.
either.
Yeah.
And you can see how a lot of these things can develop in childhood, but they can also develop in your adult relationships. And a lot of people, I mean, like I said, hey, we're changing and evolving creatures, thank goodness. Which
Yeah.
means that yes, we can get into swinging from a anxious attachment to avoidant attachment, that, but we can also find healthy attachment.
Right. All right. So we've talked about secure, anxious, and dismissive or avoidant. Coming back to our little story time opening, we were talking about this idea of Emma feeling insecure and anxious about the relationship, pursuing Jake. Jake is like, I just need some space. He's trying to
Yeah.
get away. He feels smothered. That is an anxious attachment person and an avoidant attachment person. When you put those together, that's the kind of dynamic that you're going to see, right? And
Hmm.
it either gender can fill either role, right? It's not about one type of
Yes.
person. Yeah.
I mean, to be fair to be fair, because of the way that we gender in the United States. Well, again, Western culture, for men to be, and again, this is blanket statements,
Mhm.
but generalities, of what we see in studies, at least because of the way that men are raised. They're raised to be strong. They're raised to not show emotion because,
Emotion is weakness. Yeah.
yep, exactly. Exactly. So, it's typically men that have the avoidant attachment
Mhm.
and women that have the anxious attachment because they're wanting and craving connection. But I do like that you mentioned that it doesn't necessarily have to be a genderized thing.
Mhm.
That because of how we grow up, because of how we perceive the world, because of our experiences, there are plenty of women that are also avoidant attachers as well. Sue Johnson, she is the mother of emotional focus therapy, talks a lot about the exchanges between different attachment styles. She talks a lot more about adult attachment. And what she says is that there is typically a dance that can happen. And I love the example that you used of Emma and Jake because you can see the dance. And what Sue Johnson calls the dance between, like, the example of Emma and Jake is pursuant and the retreater. So Emma having more of an anxious attachment style, so it seems, is more hypervigilant about pursuing Jake to
Mhm.
fulfill her needs. Hey, are you okay? Because if you're okay, then I'm okay,
Ah,
right?
interesting.
And
Yeah.
Jake is more of the retreater where he's like, I need space to be able to process everything that's happening, to even know what's going on in my own mind. And they're retreating away because the more they're being pursued, the more on the spot they feel.
Mhm.
Those that are avoidant attachers tend to also process things a little bit slower, and
Mm.
not in a bad way. It's just some people's, well, all of our brains work differently, and some work very, very fast.
Mhm.
And some are more paced at how they do things and need that more introverted time to be able to process
Mhm.
feelings. So, understanding these things about yourself and then about your partner can really help to go, especially in conflict. If you're an anxious attacher and you're most likely to be a pursuer, to maybe go, sit, stay, stay, think. And also just to give an avoidant attacher recognition of, oh, I know I need space to process. I know that I need some of that time.
Mhm.
So I'll be able to get that time if I communicate it to
Mhm.
my anxious attached partner and say, hey, I know that you're worried that I'm leaving you or that this is your fault. Truth is, I just need half an hour and then I can be more present for you. So just little things like that, little adjustments like that can work
Mm.
wonders with folks that have unhealthy attachment styles start to grow into more secure.
Right. Well, we got one left of the four that we haven't really touched on yet. And this one is
Mm,
called fearful avoidant or disorganized attachment. So like this one just sounds like chaos. That's what it sounds like.
it
So
is. It comes from chaos. It comes from chaos, and yeah, this one's harder. This one's harder, and I have to say, there's more. I mean, maybe you can sense that there's a little bit more of a oh um, emotion from me,
mm,
and that's because in practice, when I do see people that have disorganized attachment, I
mm,
understand that they're coming from a very chaotic space,
mm,
and for lack of a better word, that sucks. It's tough
yeah,
because here you have an individual that wants connection
right.
and they grew up in an environment where they were pushed and pulled, where there was pursuing and there was also retreating, and it didn't make any sense. Nobody communicated why. And that can be for more benign reasons. Again, we're not here to villainize the way
Mm,
that you grew up. I mean, my gosh, we're all just trying to figure out how to do this stuff. But it's important to know and recognize how you grew up
Mhm.
so that you can understand what is needed in the future. So being able to say, okay, I did grow up in a chaotic home. Maybe mom and dad split up, right?
Mm.
And, dad marries somebody who is very hands on, very helicopter, wanting to be so eager and supportive as a stepmother, right?
Mhm.
And you go, into that home 50% of the time, and you
Right.
have a lot of that. What can I get you? What do you need? You look sad. What can I do? Oh, just
Yeah.
almost smothering, right? And then you go to
Mhm.
mom's house, and mom, because of the trauma and pain that she went through in the divorce, um, maybe dad cheated, left her feeling abandoned and alone, maybe broken or defective. I mean, there's a lot of feelings that can come from a
Yeah.
divorce or a cheating situation. So mom's unavailable, right?
Mhm.
Mom doesn't check in,
Mm.
mom doesn't engage, right? So then you have this almost very, very cold environment. And then you go into a very, very hot environment. And that back and forth, especially when you're young, it's very hard to compute what that means. And you're just looking for consistency. So the disorganized attachment, like you said, sounds like chaos. Well, it does, it comes from chaos.
Yeah. One of the things, the phrases that I was seeing in the research or the descriptions of this was individuals want closeness, like you described, but they fear getting hurt. So, and that might be from traumatic exposure, some like they would make a bid for connection and then like get shut down,
Hmm.
so like or they're getting hurt in some other way. And so they internally they're feeling this conflict, this internal struggle of wanting to connect but being afraid to connect.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you mentioned that making a bid for connection, right? Somebody
Mm,
does that and then they're smacked down either figuratively or literally.
mm,
And, unfortunately, that can quickly put this message out that you're not safe to attach. But then again, you're also in an environment where people are trying to attach to you. Maybe parentification, for example, where this typically can happen with the oldest child, but where mom and dad rely on the oldest as a confidant, right?
mm,
So they have these more intimate, inappropriate, not sexually intimate, but just more intimate, deep conversations about adult things, work, their marriage, the other siblings, and
finances, yeah.
yeah, oh, finances, exactly, and it provides this sense of, hey, we're close,
Hmm.
you are my confidant, which is completely inappropriate for a parent-child relationship. So, oh, you're the only one I can trust, you're the only one that gets me, and the child feels special, and why wouldn't they? They're like, wow, I have this smartness, yeah, mom trusts me, I know my stuff, hey, cool.
Hmm.
But what's happening is they're not getting that the child is not getting nurtured, cared for. The attachment is more of a false sense of security and it's performative. So
Mm,
there again, you feed into the idea of I need to do something in order to get love. And then you go into, again, with a disorganized attachment, you hit the opposite somewhere else where it's like, oh, you have another parent that's like, I don't really care about you.
mm,
I'm too busy with life. Or maybe, son starts crying and dad hits him, goes, hey, no crying, grow up, toughen up.
yeah.
Where the more expressive a child gets with their emotions, that the more repressive or angry
Oh,
a child gets. So it can happen subtly, it can happen overtly.
yeah. What I liked about some of these scenarios that you were illustrating is that it doesn't have to be mom and dad's fault, right? It's not like they were bad people. Like you
Mhm.
gave the example of, the divorce, right? It's just a bad situation.
Yeah.
And you have hurt people on both sides and they're not going to be their best selves at that time.
Mhm.
possibly, right? And then you have another
Mhm.
situation where there's sickness, right?
Yeah.
Mom or dad is really sick, and all the needs and attention and focus is kind of going in that direction, and maybe there's some neglect. It's not intentional. It's not like we're trying to be bad parents, right?
Yeah, what are you going to do if there's a chronic illness? There's things that can't be helped. You're absolutely right. Like I said, it can be benign in nature,
Hmm.
you know, but it does affect. So
Yes.
yes, yeah. I want to say that even parents that do engage in manipulation,
Mm,
emotional, verbal, physical abuse, there's no excuse for bad behavior.
right.
There's no excuse for inflicting pain on another person, whatever that pain looks like. However, I in therapy and in other areas of life, you can look into faith and religion.
Mhm.
I just want to emphasize this idea of having an understanding of why people are doing what they're doing. And that's really the whole point of this attachment style work. And some of the other work that we'll go into in future podcasts is understanding the origins of people's behavior, specifically your own, but also others, gives you an opportunity to have some grace and mercy. Not that you need to, I'm not even saying you need to forgive people.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that you're excusing it, but just to go, wow, dad grew up this way and he did the best he could, but he did some things that completely affected me.
Yes.
So I need to address that.
Yep.
I don't know if that tracks, it makes sense. I just wanted to emphasize that yeah, we do need to have an understanding of behavior. That's huge in being
Yep.
able to repair some of the pains that we carry.
And really, that's what a lot of this comes down to, right? It's just understanding my own situation, my own feelings, and the way I feel secure or not secure, and the way
Mm,
I engage in relationships. And because of that, I need to understand it just to address things so that I can have a healthy relationship today with my spouse and also with our children, right?
right. Yeah, to understand where your tendencies go.
Hmm.
This is it's kind of funny. You think as a therapist that you're going to go to grad school and you're going to learn all these techniques. Surprisingly, no. Surprisingly, no. Um, well, you do, but a lot of emphasis in a lot of therapeutic grad programs talk about how to understand yourself and
Hmm.
how to understand your biases. And it's important to do that because if you go into a situation where you're trying to help somebody else and you're sitting there going, "Ooh, man, men are bad," then
Hmm.
how could you ever really support somebody? And it's the same with attachment too. As a parent or as a spouse, understanding your own biases and your own tendencies to have knee jerk reactions or to think certain things is vital because you could bring that up. Again, perfection is not what we're looking for. We're
Hmm.
looking for open communication, authenticity, ownership. So if
Right.
you've had, for example, a betrayal, like we talked about,
Hmm.
mom had a relationship where dad cheated. Well, does that mean every man will cheat? No. Does
Yeah.
that mean mom might think that or start to have that fear?
Hmm.
Yeah, of course. So the work is going to be, well, yes, I view things that way. Yes, that's going to affect how I attach because in attachment, you're talking about having trust. What does
Hmm.
that mean? Trust in others or trust in yourself. So yeah, I think you're naming some really important things of
Yeah.
awareness.
One of the things you mentioned there, I just want to point out in that scenario of the husband cheats and there's a
Mhm.
divorce and the wife now has a mistrust. Like one of the things I want to point out with that is some of these attachment style wounds can come not from childhood, even. They can come
Mm.
later in life from adult relationships, even.
For sure. For sure. And how we handle it and the
Hmm.
assumptions we take from it come from what we grew up with. So
Hmm.
it's all messy, but that means that we can get in there and mess with the mess. But I wanted to go back. Speaking of children and families, you were talking about being a parent
Hmm.
and recognizing that you have a role in how your children grow.
Mhm.
And I think you have a very interesting dynamic because you have twins.
Mhm. I do all these social experiments on them. Yep. Just
I'm so jealous. I so would do that. Oh, maybe
just
that's
kidding.
why I don't have twins. But in a way, yeah, twin studies are actually very telling. Not that
Mhm.
you're doing that on your
Yep.
children, but because there's so many ways in that they're the same, right?
Mhm.
But you can see how environment can affect each of them individually, and also
Mhm.
how being in the same environment doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the same result,
Right.
which is why siblings can have different attachment styles, right?
It's true. Yeah. There's so much we could talk about with that, but I do want to move on because the next question, I think we've covered the four. So they were secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and fearful avoidant, or it's also called disorganized attachment. So there's the four. So,
Mhm.
dear listener, you may have recognized some characteristics or some level of identification with one of these or the other. So, how can I find out what my style is, my attachment style is? And then I'd also like to know what my partner is. Where can people go to figure out something like that?
There's quite a few assessments out there. I mean, you can Google something and find, some great information.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, in my practice, like to use something called the Attachment Project. So I know we're going to put a link
Mm-hmm.
in this episode so that you can find it. It's a free resource, extremely helpful. I appreciate that they rely on research and continuously update their services based on research. But what I like about this particular attachment assessment is that it not only assesses your present attachment style, but
Mm-hmm.
also goes back to where it came from. So how was caregiver one, typically mom? How was caregiver two, typically dad? It just, depends on
Mm-hmm.
your life circumstance. But they ask you about your past and present relationship with those caregivers. And then they also ask you about the present. And it's interesting to see what that looks like. It can be very, very different. So I think that that information can be very telling as, well, how do you feel with people, certain genders? How do you feel with people in power? And what informed your present day situation?
Yeah, I went through that assessment recently just because I wanted to be fresh. And so it went like through four different categories. You mentioned like the mother figure, the father figure, any current romantic relationship,
Mhm.
and other people more generally. Just,
Right.
I think of this as like coworkers, neighbors,
Mhm.
extended family kind of situations. So just
Right.
how do I relate to them? And what's interesting is it gives you the assessment and like charts it out. You might have a very strong, secure attachment to a father, perhaps, but maybe not to a mother. Or it might
Mhm.
just be a little different, right? Because like I felt more comfortable and more safe sharing intimate feelings with one parent or the other, right? And then
Right.
how I relate to my partner is different than how I relate to other people more broadly, right? So like
Mhm.
it's interesting because it helps chart all that out and just kind of think about it.
I'm nosy. What'd you get?
Yes. So I was fortunate to grow up in I consider a healthy, very healthy two-parent home, and
Mhm.
so my youthful growing up was secure attachment. I have a secure attachment with my spouse, so that was interesting. But it's also just interesting to seeing how that was a little bit different in what directions it was going
Mm,
with the different aspects. So yeah, we have a link
yeah.
to that. You already mentioned it doesn't charge anything. You do have to give your email address to be able to get the full report. And they are selling workbooks for people who are interested in going deeper on understanding some of these. But we have no affiliation
Mhm.
with that. We just wanted to share it because we think it's a good resource.
Yeah, and the workbooks are great. I appreciate that they're based on the results that you got, and they're just ways to dig into self more. Again,
Mhm.
know who you are, know why you operate the way that you do. So it's one of those operating manuals to help with self awareness.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and so you have your partner go through it as well, and then you can begin to have some interesting enlightenment and conversations.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, personally, like I said, I've used this with a lot of clients, and it's been revelatory because we're able to come back together and say, okay, you have this attachment, you have this attachment. Let's see what wounds we can work with and how we can support each other in that. And it's interesting. My husband and I actually took the assessment early in our marriage.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, we were the traditional classic anxious attacher. He's an avoidant attacher. And that's been, I mean, really, well, only a therapist would say that it was a fun journey, right? But I mean, it's understandable and humorous in some ways to be able to see yourself in text and go, oh my goodness, that's me. That's me. I do
Mm.
that. Oh, and I mean, that's what these assessments, as we share them, can provide for you is it can just be so validating to
Mhm.
understand why you're doing what you're doing and to know why your partner's doing what they're doing. And what it did for us was it helped our conflict,
Mhm.
especially because we were able to say, oh, hey, Lisa, you're pursuing me like a rabid dog. And, in my head, I'm going, oh, I thought I was just trying to solve conflict. I thought I was being healthy and proactive.
Uh-huh.
And getting to see what it looks like from his point of view. And of course, him being an avoidant attacher, his style of needing space,
Mhm.
he's able to go, oh my goodness, I can see how I played into your rabid dog tendencies.
Mhm.
And that sounds unflattering, but I'll own that. I definitely had that. Hey, wait, where are you going? Wait, are you mad at me? Are you leaving me? Ah, I mean, yeah, it happens, right? But
Yeah.
he was able to go, oh my goodness, by me not communicating to you that I'm overwhelmed, because that really, with the retreaters, those that are avoidant,
Mhm.
there was a study that the Gottmans did that showed that they hooked people up to biometric measurements. So, heart rate,
Yeah.
blood pressure, heat, body temperature, things like that, brain activity. And you would think that the anxious attacher, right, would be the most active one because the anxious attacher is the pursuer,
Mhm.
right? They found out the opposite. It was
Oh.
the avoidant attacher, that the retreater, that was actually having the bigger physiological response. And I think that's something really important for those in mixed orientation relationships, let's call it,
Mhm.
meaning, oh, we have this kind of attachment and this kind of attachment working together. Understanding the inner workings of it is helpful because once I was able to go, oh my gosh, you're actually feeling more than I am.
Mm.
So my husband's need to retreat was just as big, if not bigger, than my need to pursue and to fix and to solve to feel safe.
Mhm.
So that was revelatory for both of us to be able to give just little nuggets of assurance so that
Right.
we could get the things that we needed. So these can be extremely transformational in a relationship just to even understand the
Yeah.
basics of what you're operating from.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to awareness, right? Just once I have that conscious awareness of where I feel this draw to go, this bias, right? I like that you described
Hmm.
as a bias for this direction, this behavior. Just when I becomes conscious, they're like, oh, now I can actually have a little bit more ability to intervene or to be able to communicate and just even give feedback of this is what I'm feeling.
Hmm.
And, so I love that just that it makes an unconscious thing become a little bit more conscious.
Yeah. You've said this before. We've tried to make sure we highlight this, but is the relationship doomed if you have, an avoidant and a pursuer? No, no. You might always carry that lens, that
Hmm.
that idea with you, but it's what you do about it. It's how you behave. Instead of behaving from a place of fear and old messaging, are you cognizant of, oh, wow, I have these biases, I have these tendencies. So I'm going to name them, when they're happening and take ownership of them.
Right.
So yeah, that relationship being doomed, no. And actually, what's kind of fun is I've seen couples start off as, one or the other, anxious, avoidant, all that, and actually take an assessment later and go, my gosh, we are healthily attached. Maybe a
Mhm.
little skewed, like you said, a little pulled
Yeah.
in that direction on occasion. But my goodness, you're able to, in a marriage, you have a very unique opportunity to grow
Mhm.
and to feel more safety in self and in
Yeah.
others. It's a very, very cool thing.
Yeah. Because I will say, when I was younger married, early married, it was still this insecurity of, oh no,
Mhm.
is my relationship solid? Is it, just wanting reassurance. And
Yeah.
so I can see how it would be very natural, just because like this is a new relationship for me. It's the most important thing in my life right now. And I'm very anxious about making sure it's healthy, and that
Yeah.
my relationship, and that the love is being reciprocated. Right. So
Hmm.
I can totally see how we can start in one way, and then as we settle in and we have reassurance, and over time we have trust, then there's more security.
Yeah. The good news is that it's really in your hands to make these changes. So we invite you to find out what your attachment style is. Invite you to not only get to know yourself, your biases, and the things that come with attachment style, but to understand your partner as well.
Yeah. Yes, you definitely should check out the assessment we're sharing. It's free. It's super helpful to get this insight into yourself and your partner. And now I did have a question for you, Lisa. From the therapeutic aspect, I was wondering if I am someone who I identified with even just these descriptions we have done, and I haven't even done the assessment, right? But I've identified that I think I'm maybe a disorganized attachment or one of the other
Mhm.
ones. And I recognize that I would like to move in a direction of being a more secure attachment. How do I go about doing that? Is that like personal therapy, or do I do that with my partner as couples therapy? Like, how would you go about helping someone in that situation?
I mean, really, if you want to save some money, just go on Instagram and like type in blah 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 attachment and then just see what comes up. You'll learn from the memes, right? No, I think that's a question that I think a lot of people find themselves in. When you're single, not in a relationship, and you want to do attachment work, it is a lot of reparative work, meaning you're going in to the parts of yourself that have been injured, the parts
Mm,
of yourself that are either telling you you're not you're not enough, or the parts that are saying other people are never going to be able to support you or help you.
mhm,
And that's the self work, and that can be done, of course, if you're in a couple. What's different and unique about being in a marriage is that you can go to couples counseling and be able to learn how to navigate both both of your attachment styles and how you can provide safety for each other. And that's, they're two different kinds of work.
mhm,
They are. So, to answer your question, you really could go either way. And that's going to depend on your circumstances. You might be in a position right now where this is a topic of great interest to you. You've done the introspection, but maybe your spouse is preoccupied or um, isn't wanting to be engaged in therapy or self-help work at this time. You know what? You can make a really big difference by just understanding yourself and understanding how you relate in a relationship.
mhm.
And what tends to happen, this is a little, well, it's not a little known secret, but something that I like to or have seen in therapy, is that one person coming to therapy can make a difference in the system that they're in the marriage and the family system that they're in. So, yeah, don't be afraid to pursue individual therapy to be able to support some of the changes that you need to make on yourself, the paradigm shifts, the healing, things like that. But yes, there's room for both.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed our little dive into attachment styles. It's a big topic, and it's not something you can just listen to here and say, oh, I've got it. My relationship is solved. This is one of those things where it's important to spend time understanding. I love your coming back to know thyself, right? Understand where I'm coming from, what my needs are, where my securities, insecurities are, and then also understanding my partner. And because you're dealing with all these variables, all these moving, changing dynamics, it's an adventure that we get to live and explore as a couple. So that's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that rounds out our discussion for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll continue with us on Passion Place.
See you next time.